Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
So, up bright and early, keen as mustard. I'm joined by Brett Holland. Brett, welcome to the Talent Equation.
Hi, Stu. Yep, pleasure to be here. Even though it's pretty early.
Well, you've been up really early. Dogs walk, the whole thing, you know. But either way, it's good to be bright and breezy, and can't think of a better way to start the morning by having a conversation with you about all things talent development, coaching, and wherever else the world takes us.
Yep, completely agree.
So, starting point is, as I always do with Talent Equation episodes, is tell the world about yourself, kind of what's your backstory, what are you doing now, and anything else that you think's of interest in terms of influences and kind of why you do what you do.
Right, okay, so I guess I'll start really broad, Stu, and start right from the beginning. Very, very sporty as a youngster. Any sport going, lots of unstructured play, which may be something we discuss later on. But I remember kicking a football in the garden, tying things against the crossbar, trying to hit it from the other side of the garden, playing cricket at school in the nets, one hand, one bounce, changing rules constantly, and all that kind of stuff. My predominant sport now is hockey. I'm now fortunate enough to work in hockey on a full-time basis. But I actually didn't start that until I was about 13. Just had a really keen PE teacher who basically let us do a lot of things that probably wouldn't be allowed to do now. So we used to take balls down at lunch onto the Astro, used to take a goalie kit down there with a mate or two. One of us would get in the goalie kit, the other one would just smash the ball at each other. So, and that was fun. I then joined a club pretty early, and probably didn't know it then, but just come in contact with some really great people who have been really significant people in my life growing up and moving on from there. So I had a really good club environment. I think really interestingly, I started kind of helping out and coaching pretty quickly after starting playing. And that just kind of continued through. So university, well, in fact, year before university, a gap year, and coached most of the year. Went to university. Coaching was my kind of part-time income, if you like, kind of kept me going through there. Specialised in coaching as we went through. Also picked up motor control and skill acquisition as a module in my second year. And while thinking about this podcast, Stu, there's a very distinct moment in my second year where right at the end of this module where we focus very much on information processing and this input, process, output kind of model. We had a lecturer come in right at the end and said, right, we're going to do this a little bit different for the last few weeks. And he said, there's ecological psychology. And actually, you don't really think about things properly, and it all kind of just happens. And I was like, what is this going on about? Why is the other lecturer coming in to talk about this? It's all a bit strange. But then actually started looking into it and researching it. I was like, wow, this is really, really interesting. And then actually took that into my third year. And again, remember very vividly a Vita Voce that we did. We had to write a piece in a group around dynamical systems, ecological psychology, and then had like an oral exam afterwards and just loved it. Actually loved talking about the subject. And that kind of spurred me on and become a bit of a passion. And for those that know me, I'm quite geeky, and I'm quite proud to admit that. And then probably more recently left university, went into teaching, spent 4 or 5 years teaching, ended up teaching and managing a group at an FE college, took over the hockey program. After about 4 or 5 years, decided to try something different, packed up, went to Australia, spent a year there teaching, and then also kind of through a chance meeting really ended up taking over the junior section of a really big club out there called Doncaster, not to be confused with the one up north.
I can imagine the weather's very different.
I did get a few LinkedIn messages. Oh, Brett, you're back in England. No, not quite, but we'll be soon. And just loved the hockey, Stu. Loved being outside. Loved seeing people develop and grow. And I think I shared a story with you when I saw you the other weekend about this one guy who was coaching under 12s. It was our first ever game, and we got beaten heavily. And second game, it was a bit closer. Third game, we actually looked like we were going to win. And in Australia, under 12s, you can stand on the pitch and coach with them. And this guy went to me, Brett, if we win this game, it's going to be the best day ever, like this. And I just love that interaction and being outside and all that kind of stuff. So my goal when I came back from Australia, before I started coming back, was to try and make that happen. Can I forge a career within hockey? So spoke to a few people, ended up getting into an independent school coaching, did probably everything and anything I could to make that full-time coaching journey a dream and a reality, which meant a lot of hours, a lot of time, a lot of miles. But that then led me into tutoring and coach development with my teaching background. Fortunate to do quite a lot of work in the talent pathway within England, within hockey. Did a few days with our junior internationals, and eventually it's led me to where I am now, which is at Loughborough University, and I head up the program there.
So
and hopefully in a nutshell, Stu, that's everything.
Well done. Very good. It's a good the constraints of time, but it was brilliant. One thing that just occurred to me then is that so you followed what I would describe as a fairly atypical path as a coach, in the sense that it wasn't like, right, I'm going to play, you know, as high a level as I can, and then right, now that's stopping. What am I going to do next? Oh, coaching looks like a bit of a wheeze. Maybe I'll give that a crack, like a lot of us did. You're pretty early in coaching as being the career for you. Is that about right?
Yeah, I guess so, to some extent. So I still played. I played alongside coaching. And as I mentioned, started probably a bit later than other people who I was playing against, but didn't do anything internationally, but I played National League. When I was out in Australia, played a reasonable standard. But it was always kind of a thing that I'd do as well.
Right.
I guess one of my philosophies deep down is just, you keep doing something you enjoy and work exceptionally hard at it, you're probably going to be all right at some point down the line. And that's kind of how I've gone about things. And then, coaching has now just got to a point where it is now my career, which means, unfortunately, I don't get to play a great deal. So Summer League is now my season. So I'm now 3 games into the season. But no, it's just the way that's happened, and I'm pretty happy, even though I do really enjoy playing and probably do miss that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I suppose the difference is that you've been honing your craft, shall we say, and on a learning journey around coaching, you know, in parallel with a playing career, fairly early in a playing career, you know, at university, that's fairly early on. And you made a decision, I suppose, that was something that you were really kind of interested in and something that you really wanted to sort of forge as your career path. So in lots of ways, you know, that's, I suppose, been that's not a normal path that a lot of people follow. Most people don't really necessarily think about coaching until playing finishes, if that makes sense, because they're sort of focused on that. But you clearly had this idea that coaching was definitely something you were very interested in, as much as you were interested in playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a bit of my personality and character that teaching was the first thing I went into, and I do just enjoy that development, that progression, support and challenge. And I thoroughly enjoyed teaching. I could definitely see myself being a teacher. It was just that transition. Actually, coaching is what I really, really have the passion for. As again, some of our conversations, Stu, coaching is very complex, very complicated. You never quite master it, and maybe that's something that I'm drawn towards as well. The fact there was always going to be a next challenge, a next hurdle. I've got about 2 or 3 to-do lists on the go, and they're never going to be completely done, because as soon as you do one, there's another 2 or 3 things that are going to pop on there. Yeah, and kind of enjoy that as well, to be honest.
So something else you said in your introduction, which I think is an interesting springboard, is the moment when you were exposed exposed, is that the right word? I don't know. Introduced to ecological psychology. And up to that point, I imagine, having been learning about information processing and everything else, and that all makes that's total sense, isn't it? I get that. Yeah, that works. And it's sort of quite logical and quite linear, I suppose, to a certain extent. And then all of a sudden, somebody comes along with this different idea that's far more chaotic and messy. And I imagine at that point, it was like, I suppose there was almost a moment in time when you were like, this is garbage, what a load of rubbish, this doesn't make any sense. And then all of a sudden things started to fall into place, and then I'm putting words in your mouth, but I mean, tell me about that moment.
It was if you were there, Stuart. And it's strange. So I remember it quite vividly. So I remember the room. I remember it was really light in the room. The other lecturer, who was a great lecturer at the time, Dr. Jamie North, delivering the course, and this other lecturer kind of came in. I remember him sitting on the front of the desk. He's like, right, now we're going to focus on this, and kind of it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, well, where is the input, and then where is the where is the logical, to use kind of the words, the non-linearity is like, that doesn't make sense. It needs to go from A to B to C and go from that way. And then obviously Newell's model, his triangles. Oh, okay, well, actually that kind of makes sense. And as time went on, it's like, this actually really does make sense. And actually, the game asks us to do lots of different things, and there's lots of things going on. And where do we store this information if it is the information processing? Actually, if we break down all the different tiny micro skills that within sport, that's a lot of information to try and store somewhere. It doesn't really make sense. Actually, it was really conflicting with what I thought was true before. And then really interesting, very similar time to that, I did my level 2 coaching course. I remember having to drive to Wrexham to do it because I really need to do it, because I was probably behind on my, what was your traditional level approach. And I was probably coaching beyond where I should have been with my qualification at that point. And he made a really key point. He said, like, level 1, you learn about the skills. Actually, level 2, we now learn about how to put that in the game. And he said, like, most games that you do, you need to have a defender. So the defender's there, it makes it more real. And everything was just kind of clicking into place. And then I had the opportunity when I left university to manage the program at the FE college I was working at. And it was always in my mind, okay, well, how am I creating a situation that's replicable of the game? What's representative? And I didn't probably know that word at that time, but I was always thinking, okay, well, how does this kind of match up? What am I asking them to do something they would look to do in the game? And yeah, then as you said, so you kind of all pieced into place after being a very, what is this situation? What is this stuff this guy's talking about? Everything makes so much sense before.
So I find myself really quite envious that you had that exposure at that stage, because that gave, obviously then that kind of reframes an awful lot about then the sources of information that you're going to look for, your practice from the outset. So you're going to be taking that concept, you're going to be applying it, and obviously getting the opportunity to get that kind of live in-time feedback with the participants, and almost, test on the fly these concepts and ideas and begin to hone your craft. And the reason I'm envious is because I've spoken on the podcast several times about what I describe as the wilderness years.
I was waiting for that. Yeah.
Which is, having been, my kind of influence was, TGFU. I remember Rick Charlesworth, all conquering Australian women's hockey coach, talking about designer games. And I'm like, this is interesting. There's something in this. Yeah. And then kind of just using those ideas and kind of, scrabbling around for scraps of information from whatever sources I could get, and trying to do something with them really badly, really clumsily. I mean, in reflection, I really do think about that. And then only latterly started to stumble across through exposure to individuals, and then also through being able to pick up sources on the internet. Twitter's been, huge for me as far as that's concerned. Yeah. Being able to then start to go, right, oh yeah. And I mean, so I'm just thinking about how valuable, on reflection, do you feel that kind of moment was in terms of then your future direction?
That's a really interesting question, because at the time, I probably didn't think that.
Yeah.
And then looking back, you think, well, actually, that is probably a moment. Yeah. And just from asking me to be on the podcast, obviously reflected a bit more recently about the journey and all these bits and pieces. And yeah, it probably was a really big moment. And it's really interesting. Listen to your most recent podcast with Mark Upton, and you had the discussion around, do you want knowledge first or do you want experience first, and that blend. And actually I probably had a little bit of knowledge but probably didn't know how to utilize it properly, and then probably built up the experience. And then actually as Twitter then exploded and all these great fabulous resources started coming online about constraints-led coaching and all these other kind of variation of games-based approaches started coming out, I was like, okay, well, I should probably use a little bit of that, and actually I could probably develop my session design and how I coach sessions based on these great bits of information that are out there. And if they were available X amount of years in the past, would I be further along in my journey as well? Because very much not the finished article. I'm heavily motivated and passionate to kind of get even better. But words like representative design, okay, I was kind of looking at that at some point, but had no idea that was the word to use, or to really think in that kind of way. And you mentioned Danny Newcomb's Your Funnel of Variability, but his environment builders. But actually having something like that 5 or 10 years ago would have been just awesome. Okay, well, check that off. Yeah, okay, check that off. Instead of just kind of doing it the way that I thought was working. So yeah, it's interesting.
Let's dig into that a little bit. You just mentioned about the environment builder, Danny's environment builder. Yeah. How do you use that, or how does that help you with, for example, designing a practice or running a practice?
Yeah, so I haven't told Danny this, and actually I messaged him yesterday, so he needs to reply to a message, so I shouldn't big him up too much. I'm going to try and meet him for a coffee in the week.
If you get a reply within like a day, you're doing very well. I've been waiting for a week or two. He's busy.
He's a very busy guy. He's a very busy guy. Yeah. It's on my desk at work, so I printed it off. It's on I've got a little board behind my computer, and it sits there with a few other bits that are really important to me. So when I'm planning sessions, it's just there. Okay, well, how might I manipulate this? How might I manipulate that? Is it representative? Am I, without going too technical, constraining to afford? Am I limiting the opportunities of people, or am I actually giving the opportunities to execute skills that might be appropriate to the situation we're trying to practice? And I guess taking it on a step further, where I'm really trying to go is narrow those sessions where possible for the individual. So I believe I know the players I've had in the program this year really well, and I've put some strategies in place to try and do that. But there's certain players who I just want to push, challenge, consider things slightly differently. So going back to conference, we were out the other weekend, Stu. Unfortunately, you weren't there for Russell Earnshaw's talk, which was brilliant. But we met a little while ago, and he introduced the games within the games kind of concept. And I've just been playing around with that really, and giving individuals certain constraints and certain rules or bits and pieces within the game, but also doing it for different lines. So in my one training session right midfield, your challenge is score an open play goal. Forwards, your challenge is try and create opportunities for them to score open play goals, or you've got to try and score a tap in on the back post, and just give challenges within the session that you're trying to develop. And we are quite principle based. So just taking a step back in terms of the context and where I'm coming from with the role that I do at Loughborough, we're in quite a niche situation. So it's a university, so we have a constant change of players. Players will come in for 3, 4, maybe 5 years. So actually, if I say, right, the game plan is this, and we're going to pass A to B, B going to pass to C, if that's not on, you're going to pass here, and these are all the different structures that we're going to do. Actually, we've just got to get everyone to relearn that every single year, because the players are going to be constantly changing. Plus also, one of my 4 big things that I try and do at the university is just create decision-rich environments. So if I'm telling them what to do on the field all the time, I'm not going to be creating a decision-rich environment. So yeah, that's kind of part of my thinking and planning, kind of a strategy or an underpinning kind of level. So that will then affect how I go through and I plan my sessions. But yeah, back to the point originally, it is on my desk at work. So, and I generally do my planning on my desk, so it is right in front of me.
So, just following that thread for a bit, but I do want to circle back at some point to talk about your role at Loughborough, because I think it's it's just interesting about your environment. And you know what, on the podcast we've talked about forms of life before, and I do think forms of life are quite interesting in terms of what your environment is like. And anyway, we'll circle back to that, but just for now, just to stay on this thread, you mentioned decision-rich environments. So I love the term, and I've heard it before, and I think it's really valuable. But take me through your process for, if there is a process, for designing something, a decision-rich environment, or even it might be easier just to say bring to life for us, like in a session or a session that you would do that is a good example of a decision-rich environment for players.
Okay, so I guess it does. When I talk about the decision-rich environment, it's the whole package. So it's on and off the field, hockey and probably non-hockey at the same time. When it comes to on the field, we are working to principles. So it's not necessarily, as mentioned earlier, A to B, and we must do this, we must do that. Actually, I want things to be quite fluid and dynamic. And the more dynamic and fluid we can be, the harder we're going to be to play against, is also another benefit of that. So the majority of our training is game-based in some way, shape or form. And it always has some sort of outcome at the end of it. But the solution that players will need to find to overcome the problem is going to be different, and be different for different players and for different situations. So kind of hopefully within that, they're making lots of different decisions. We'll then layer up with different constraints, change things around a little once we think we're getting to the point where we understand it. And then we throw in these kind of games within it as well. So actually individual players are then having to make very much different decisions within the bigger game where everyone's making decisions at the same time. It might be that people know the game that some of the players are playing within it, or actually some of them might not. I'll give you one example in particular. So we've got a defender who's a fantastic character, a really big part of the team, and she's fantastic at retaining the ball. So she plays either left or right half, generally for us. You give the ball to her, and you know you're probably not going to lose the ball. But she often does so by winning feet, winning fouls, and that's fine. So at times we lose the opportunity to go forward, because obviously we win the foul, defence then gets set behind the ball. So occasionally we've thrown the constraint on the rule in that player can't win fouls, can't win feet. So she has to come up with a solution to try and play forwards more often. And it's come down to ball receipt quite a lot, allowing that ball to come across her body so she can play forwards a bit more easily. And at times we've told other players, but other times we haven't. And actually at times when we've told other players, some players have cottoned on and they put a bit more pressure on her because they know that you're not going to lose it, you're not going to make a foul. So that's very interesting. Again, great for her because it's more pressure, more challenge, and she then hopefully enhance her skills that a little bit further. We also try and, so within these principles, we talk about what are the best ways of applying them. And actually that is a group decision, a group. So to give you one example, we've on transition. So when we lose the ball, we look to something called kill the counter, because counter-attacking hockey is deadly. It's often when you score the goals or create goals and opportunities is when the team turn over the ball and they attack. Defence is scramble, defence are organised, it's easy to go forward. So we talk about killing the counter, and we run a few games that create these unstructured defence kind of situations. And we go through, okay, what are we doing? What's going to be good here? Okay, well, where do we need to go? Do we squeeze here? Do we squeeze there? Do we song to the ball? Okay, and we talk through those situations. It'd be very easy for me to turn around and go, right, we must do this, we must do that, we must do this. Yeah. But actually, when you told things, Stu, and I'm sure you can relate to this as much as I can, it doesn't go in quite so much unless you actually live it yourself, do it, make the mistakes, etc., instead of just being told all the time.
Well, it goes in immediately, right then and there.
Yeah.
And then as a coach, you think you get enormous gratification by going, oh, look, yeah, it's working. but it doesn't stay there. And then when it comes to the match and they don't do it, you tearing your hair out because you can't understand why it's not worked.
And on the flip of that, it takes longer, doesn't it? It takes a lot longer for that kind of learning to take place. And if you maybe look at the season that I've had, and again, we shared a conversation right at the beginning of the season around challenge and the challenges the players we didn't face in pre-season. Well, we certainly had those challenges in the first 6 games of the season without finding a win. Even though actually we played some pretty good hockey and the girls are really buying in, but it just took a little bit of time to find, really find and enhance those principles we're trying to work towards. And hockey did get better and better and better. Then after Christmas, we lost 2 games, which was fantastic. And then the resilience that we showed going into, so University Hockey Works league structure. The league structure then takes you into a seeding competition for the cup, and then you go through the cup until the final or whenever you're knocked out. So
a bit like the kind of a NFL works. There's a
exactly.
league,
you go to playoffs,
a knockout.
Yeah, exactly. So going into the league, we struggled. We struggled to connect as a group. We had a lot of change last year, so a lot of players left, a lot of new players in. I was new and I wanted to change a few things, so it took time. And with my approach being a bit more decision-making-esque instead of set patterns, it was always going to take that a little bit longer. But the challenges that we overcame at the beginning of the year, I think, put us in an unbelievable stead to overcome challenges at the end of the year. So in both the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, we came from a goal behind to go through and win. And even in the final, we were fortunate to be 3-0 up with, I think, 12 minutes to play or something like that. We then conceded and no one reacted. It was like, okay, we've still got this. It's fine. We've still got confidence, still got belief. And they did put a little more pressure on at the end, but actually we didn't look riled. We actually looked comfortable, and we had belief and all this confidence that we'd amassed through the challenges that we'd faced in the previous weeks and months.
So in many ways, probably wasn't by design, by your own admission, I think, but it wasn't by design necessarily. I remember, you're right. I mean, we did have a conversation because you were concerned. You flagged it, didn't you? That this is a group of very able individuals who are used to success. And for the benefit of people who don't understand university sport in the UK, Loughborough is the kind of the sports, certainly in England, it's the sports university of choice, generally speaking. And there's an awful lot of people out there, myself included, who will be spitting in their coffee at hearing that. However, the reality is that's what Loughborough is known for, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. And it has been for many years, and it's peaks and troughs, but thankfully we work exceptionally hard. And from not going to Loughborough myself and now being on the other side of the fence and working within it, it is an exceptional organisation to work for. And I do feel incredibly privileged. We're
circling back to that because I'm definitely going to talk about that. But just on that, so I just carrying that one through. So you've got this group of individuals who essentially have gone there because it's a really good place, a really good place to go. So this is a group of very high quality individuals. You've got 2 or 3 internationals in the program as well, and there's some issues with integrating them that I know we've talked about. But even so, they're there.
We've got 6 or 7.
6 or 7. Oh, okay. Sorry,
yep.
Yes, I forgot. So anyway, so you've got a load of players there, and this is a group who are used to winning. And you were concerned actually that things might be too easy for them, and they might need some challenge point. And I threw at you some ridiculously crazy ideas about how you might be able to challenge that. As it happened, the transition from previous coaching group to your coaching group and your methodology versus previous methodology actually created some of that destabilization and perturbation as it was. And that in itself then brought about some challenges around results, which I imagine was quite a difficult time for you in terms of being new into role and expectations and managing some of that. We can talk about that. But the interesting thing on reflection is that you were able to utilize the difficulty to then bring you or to use that as a means by which to develop and strengthen the resolve of the side that you kind of feel that was valuable to you later on in the season when it came to the crunch points. What makes you think about this is that you often get very similar stories, don't you? I don't know if you ever watch America's Game, the NFL thing talks about like the journey of the Super Bowl winner. Often they don't have the best season, the kind of regular season. But then they sort of come together in the playoffs because of the challenges that they face. Kind of just interesting to reflect on that.
I mean, if I had my time against you, I probably wouldn't design it that way, as it was a challenge for everyone involved right at the beginning. But there were signs within it that we were doing a good job. I mean, the style of hockey we were playing is really exciting. We were creating lots of opportunities, but not scoring. And it wasn't disastrous in terms of what we were doing. We just weren't getting the results. And it just happened we played the 3 top teams in the first 4 games. And actually, I think game 5, so we played where the league stand up. We played 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th in the first 5 games of the season. And that was always going to be a challenge. But you're right, that tough run did bring the group a lot closer together, and we tried to put a few interventions in place which strengthened the kind of the challenge that we had and turned it into positive. So I remember one of the early things we did was got a couple of laptops at one training session and linked it to some of the principles that we're trying to apply, and I go, right, you look at this one, you guys look at that one, and then we get some feedback to each other. What do you see? And the girls turned around and went, actually, there's some really good stuff going on. And actually, we did this well, but we probably need to tighten this and this. And that realization coming from them was much more powerful than if I stood there in front of the TV and went, right, this is good. You're not going to believe me because we're losing, but I'm telling you it's good. And actually, these 2 things we need to work on. But coming from the players, that actually made a really big difference. And when they fed back, they didn't feed back to me because I don't need to know it. Actually, the players do. So they fed back to each other. And we spent quite a lot of time doing that. We also had a bit of a workshop one evening where we went and watched the ladies rugby team train. And our ladies rugby train are really high intensity. It's very loud. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to go and see what they do on training nights. And I went up into a meeting room. I put 3 questions on a piece of flip chart. One was, why do we train? What do you want to train to look like? Or what do you want to get out of training? Then how do we do it? And the players, and I'd kind of facilitated and prompted, but the players talked for about an hour and a half on those 3 things. And actually what came out was most people want the same things in training, but we probably weren't overly aware that we all wanted those things. And the word that I was really pleased came out regularly, which was accountability. So you need to be accountable for yourself, but actually you probably need to help your mates out every now and again and be accountable for them too. So if they start to drift off, or they maybe had a really crappy day and they're maybe talking about this crap day that they've had, you probably say, well, okay, as part of that, we can talk about it after training. And maybe if you kind of get in through training, you might come out the other side and actually be in a really good mood. And since that day, there's been some really good examples of people coming to me after the session and saying, do you know what, I was in a really crap mood going into training, done training, come out of it, and now I'm in a really good place. But I think if you have a conversation with Stu, if we were training together and I went to you, I've had a really rubbish day today and this happened, that kind of puts you in a slightly negative place as well. And then we might put another person in a negative place, and that just spreads a little bit. So we said, we just got to mask it, get on. We know why we're here. We know what we want to do. We know how we're going to do it. Let's go and do it. And then for most training sessions, that was on the wall before training. We either consciously talked about it or subliminally it was just kind of on there. And that was one of our things that we're going to try and work towards. And actually, after that point, our training just got better and better and better. We got to some really exciting points. We had some really fantastic training sessions. And that then just grew the resilience. We started putting competitions and consequence in training at the right time. And that just grew and grew and grew.
It's fascinating. That something that you may or may not have picked up on here, but something that I heard while you were discussing that was, and I think there's a useful lesson here, and I've learnt this lesson the hard way, is when things aren't quite going right. So you're doing okay. You're getting, the team's doing well. You're seeing things in front of your eyes, and it's easy to self-delude here, isn't it? And spot the things that you want to see. But objectively, wow, even if you just look at the stats, you go back on the video, you get feedback from other people, and it says, look, we're actually playing pretty well here, but we're not getting the results. I think a lot of people at that point, their instinctive reaction would be almost to double down on control. What you did was the opposite. You doubled down on player ownership. Now, some people will probably think of that as an abdication of responsibility, but in actual fact, I actually think that's quite a brave move. A lot of people's instinctive reaction is, right, I'm going to step in here. We're going to work on goal scoring. We're going to sort it out because we're going to get some goals scored. Because that's what we're going to do. What you did, you placed the locus of control in the players and said, right, let's look at this objectively as a group and then work out between us what are the things that we need to try and do. And then let's be really focused on that. Now, immediately then, you're then essentially the servant leader. You're providing them with environments within which they can improve at the things they've identified need to be improved. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, we did work on goal scoring, and that was in there. But
they've identified that, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to one of my 4 principles in terms of I think the program is set up, and my philosophy is create this decision-rich environment. And if I did come in and say, this needs to happen, this needs to happen, and this needs to happen, I'm not giving that decision-making opportunity to the players. And that's where it kind of filters down from, essentially.
Just forgive me if I missed this earlier on while I was scribbling my notes, trying to keep up with you. You just mentioned 4 principles. What are they?
So kind of coming into role, these are the 4 things I thought was really, really important. And they sit within the university's framework, but they're kind of how hockey kind of bring those to life. And the way that I've got a little picture of how I got them, and they're in 4 circles, but actually thinking about it a little bit further, I don't think that's right, because there's one that is the most powerful, which is value the individual. I don't see these people for very long, and in terms of former life and actually their stage of life, they've got an unbelievable amount of things going on in their world, more so than probably any other point they'll experience in the future, potentially. Coming from school environment where they know their friends, they've got some really strong friends potentially, leaving home, new location, new courses, new friends. Hockey becomes quite a big part for the people that I get the pleasure to work with. It's quite a demanding environment, so that's a big stress on them, and all the other things, so that they're still developing, and all the other bits that are kind of within that, the social pressure that comes with this age group. There are so many things going on. So for me, valuing the individual is the absolute paramount. So one of the first things I did when I got into the role was, in my schedule, in my diary each week, I ring-fenced 3 hours a week where players can come and they can book in with a one-to-one, have a chat, half an hour or whatever, and we'll talk about hockey, talk about anything, and that's ring-fenced. That's never going to go away. And for players where that didn't quite work with them, the times that I put forward, I'd hope they'd say that I was always really flexible, and we'd sort out a time to talk. And I'd always start that conversation with, how are things? How's uni? I'd also like to think I know a lot about that person's family. And just to give you an example, one of our girls who's in the under-23 program came to me at Christmas, said she's going to go visit her dad. I was like, "Oh, dad lives in Bosnia." And she's like, "Oh, how'd you know that?" I said, "Well, you mentioned it in August when we chatted on the phone." And kind of, I just think it's so important. And if it's coaching the individual, you've got to know the individual. So that is paramount. The next one we discussed, which is the decision-rich environment. So actually, are we going to take that player from point A and stretch them as long as possible and get them to point B and let that be as far away in the future and the distance as we can be? But that has to be through a process of making decisions. And Stu, getting decisions wrong is part of that. And we've certainly got some good examples of that this season. And hopefully we've learned lessons going forward. And going back to Loughborough, I think Loughborough do this exceptionally well, but I want to be known for just giving unrivaled holistic support. So I'm so fortunate. I've got an incredible group of staff around me. We call ourselves the team behind the team, which I know is pretty cute. Yeah. But I think we do a really good job, and we are a team together. We work really hard to prepare these people, prepare these players for everything they're going to do in the future, and then finally strive for excellence. And that's probably where I want to push harder next year. I think the other 3 we did a good job on this year, and they got us to a good place. But actually, how do we strive for excellence? What does that look like? How do we use our performance analysis in that? Yeah, and a lot of different factors within it. We talked a little bit at the beginning of the season about the heritage that Loughborough has, especially in hockey, and we've done relatively well at university level and at club level, but probably not so much in recent years. And we've actually got a responsibility to push that forward and be the best Loughborough that we can be. it's really interesting. Again, having one of we call them team culture sessions, basically the team being together and talking, doing stuff, whatever it might be. I actually asked them a real direct question: why did you choose Loughborough? And what did it mean to you to kind of play for Loughborough? And one of the points they brought out is that actually I can say that I've played for Loughborough because of the heritage, because of the history, and that's really powerful for them. But on the flip, it's a responsibility. We are now responsible for continuing that further. And again, that's really, really powerful.
You mentioned as one of your 4 principles, I'm glad we circled about that. We didn't cover it. So the unrivaled holistic support. So talking to you the other day, and you just kept talking about various things that you have at your disposal. So basically, I think you work in coaching Disneyland.
I would probably agree.
Just walk me through some of the things that you have at your disposal that kind of make up that picture of. Because actually, I'm not being flippant. I've always said, when it comes to talent development, that obviously the internal factors within the individual, both physical, psychological, emotional, etc., really, really important, often overlooked. But I also think that the external factors, that environment, is really key, and trying to create the best environment possible. So you talk about a decision-rich environment, but you're also trying to create a kind of a support environment, so that almost what is it? In fact, Sir Clive Woodward used to talk about this: is to create the environment, the best environment possible so the players can perform. There's no impediment to performance. And so that environment around those individuals is absolutely critical. So just talk me through some of the ways in which you provide that unrivaled holistic support.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of things, and if I forget, Stu, pull me back up on the seminar we did with Sarah Kelleher.
Oh yeah,
and when they got us to write the 3 words down that describe your environment, because I did something with that, which might double back on what we're trying to create. So yeah, I think your turn there about living in Disneyland, I do completely agree, and I do feel exceptionally fortunate to have the things at my disposal that I do. So we have the team behind the teams. We have a support staff, which includes a physiotherapist, nutritionist, S&C coach, a physiology intern, a performance analysis intern, someone who also leads on our performance analysis. I have a goalkeeper coach, and we're also now engaging a lot more with our sports psychologist, both at an individual level and really, really excited to get that more on a team level. We're going to use a 5 C's approach, which I guess we may talk about at some point. But in terms of staffing, we've got those. In and around that, I've also got a program manager who oversees what I do and gives me support. We have a kind of head of coaching, and a guy called Tony Hadley, not the guy from Spanday Ballet. He is England Athletics sprint coach and an exceptional coach at that. And then we have a sports science manager who kind of overruns everything. So in terms of support staff and people, I am incredibly fortunate. But at the same time, we still have to use those staff, and we as a team behind the team need to work incredibly hard. So we do a few bits and pieces. So we monitor the workload we ask the players to do, and we're very deliberate about the workload that we put players through. And we do that in 2 ways. So after every training session, there's a Google form that they get on their phone, which they fill in, which has their RPE score. So 0 to 10, 10 being near death, 9 being extremely, extremely brutally hard, and kind of works down to 0, which is asleep. Also, they put in how long they worked for and what it was they were doing. So was it on feet? Was it off feet? Was it a match? And each of those 3 things times by the time it takes them and the RPE gives us an arbitrary number. So we know that our week is about 2,000 units. So we work to 2,000 units. If we think we can push them a little harder, we work a little bit harder. And if we've got a busy week coming up, we will dip it the week below. As you mentioned earlier, we've got a complicating factor that we have external players that play internationally and other bits and pieces. When they go away on a camp for 2 weeks, for 2 days within the week, their units jump up to 4,000. So they will do a whole extra week compared to our program in 2 days. So actually, how do we prepare those athletes? You would think you probably need to dip them down and actually give them an easy week the week before. But actually, we probably need to get them more familiar with what 4,000 units looks like at certain points in the season. And then we can look to dip them and kind of adjust their workload where possible. We've also been fortunate. We've now picked up some player tech GPS, and now we can cross-correlate our internal monitoring with the RPEs with the external stuff.
What does RPE stand for?
Rate of perceived exertion.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah, and it's a very subjective matter. So, there's loads of things in it. So if it's an hour and a half session, if the last 20 minutes of the session is really, really hard, that would probably put a bit of a bias in my mind, and my RPE would be higher. Conversely, if it's really hard at the beginning and really easy at the end, it might make me put a lower RPE. If I hear that you've put a 9 down, Stu, I might think, oh, well, mine was only a 7, but actually, I think mine probably needs to be an 8. So it is subjective, and we know that, but actually as a rough measure, it gives us some really, really valuable data. We then meet as a team once a week. So either Monday or Tuesdays, we meet for an hour and we talk through each individual player. So it links back to our values, the individual, and we talk through the workload of each player. So if someone's come back from an injury, we want to build up a bit of load for 2 or 3 weeks in them before we chuck them back into a 2,000 unit a week, workload week. So the opportunity to do that, because they wear the GPS units, there is obviously the kind of sports bra thing that they wear. I probably should know the official name, but the sports bra thing. And I just picked up some dictaphones, and occasionally I just put dictaphones in the back of there. So there's certain players who want to look at how they communicate in the game and what they're communicating. So we use that. We have a performance analysis team, so we just get the video and I overlay the audio over the video, send it to the players, highlight certain things, maybe just get them to watch it and make their own conclusions up. We may sit in a one-to-one and talk it through. Depends on the situation, depends on the person, depends on what we're trying to get out of it. I mentioned we're looking to use the 5 C's model for psychology, where the girls or the players will do some self-analysis on where they sit on the 5 C's. So one of which is emotional control, is control, where obviously emotional control sits within that. So highlighting that someone might have a bit of a need to improve their emotional control, we can then facilitate that in training. So for example, if I use you as an example, Stu, if you don't mind, if you struggle to control your emotions against, let's say, an umpire, or if you made bad decisions,
I don't know why you've chosen me.
Hypothetically.
Have you seen me play before?
So we might be able to, at training, just facilitate situations where we give you opportunities to practice that. So I might umpire the game, and actually all the 50-50s or the 60-40s in your favour, I blow against you. So I umpire you badly, basically. Will that give the opportunity to get frustrated, get annoyed, not being able to control your emotions, and then give the opportunity to do it? For some players, they might need prepping before the session. With every player, it's usually a bit of a debrief afterwards. And actually talk about, okay, so what did you feel? How did you deal with it? What did you do? Did you, there's loads of things you can do. So did you put was there a bit of tape on your stick that you looked at and that just made you refresh your memory and kind of calm down? Did you say calm? Did you self-talk? Did you have a deep breath? And all these different strategies you can put in place to try and control your emotions better. But unless you recognise that's somewhere you need to work on, or something you need to work on, and we actually give them opportunities to practice it, it may not get better. So we're really excited to get that on board next year. The nutritionist Hattie is fantastic. Works on a bit of a team level. So we have long trips up to Durham and to Edinburgh. We're going to add Exeter this year as well. We look at, okay, what does that journey look like? At what points could we eat? What could we eat? Other interventions with players individually. So this may sound a bit interesting, but maybe writing a shopping list for some people. So someone who's maybe come from an independent school where they are boarded and they get all their food provided for them. They've probably never shopped before for themselves. So actually, what do they need to buy? And going back to decision-rich environment, we need to provide an opportunity for them to do that with a little bit of support. With some of our international girls, we look at actually what they're eating and when they're eating on a bit more of an individual basis. And then we have a physiotherapist who oversees the whole performance squad, and we try and check in with some of the international girls who have to work a little bit harder. So we've got 2 Welsh seniors who on a weekly basis will be around 4,000 units, who need that little bit extra support and check in and a little bit of work on their soft tissue, etc., especially the front of their shins when they first started moving up to that level was really, really tough for them. So I've probably missed a load of bits out of there, Stu, but again, in a nutshell, that might be some of the Disneyland stuff that we have the opportunity to employ and play in.
I bet that, though, is a challenge in some respects, because I bet in terms of you coming into this environment, probably never having had that level of holistic team around a team before, actually being able to actually get that team to be a team and coordinate that, because I imagine they're not entirely dedicated to your program. They're working with some other teams as well. They're shared across different performance units. Is that right? Yeah,
absolutely. So we've got a couple of that work just with hockey with our men's and ladies program. Then the majority of staff, so Hattie, our nutritionist, for example, works across lots and lots of programs and has a lot of athletes. Physiotherapists, very similar. So they have to spread their allegiances. But on the flip of that, you don't feel that quite so much at times, because the amount they invest into us and actually care about the players and the program that we're creating and we've created. It's pretty overwhelming at times. Last Tuesday, we got together as a whole group, a whole team, and had a planning day, and everyone was just 100% on it. We did some blue sky thinking. What is the ultimate success? Where do we want to be? And the stuff they're coming out with is just awesome. And then we all know that that's the journey we're going on, the direction we're heading, and all the things, all the deliverables and processes we can put in place all head towards that. But back to your original question, Stu, this, in terms of, if you want to call it levels, this is probably the highest level of program that I've managed. So for those who know me, won't be surprised by this, and I mentioned earlier, I'm a big hockey geek when it comes to this, and probably haven't talked about my kind of CPD journey, but I'd say it's quite vast and quite broad. So I do try and take in as much information as possible, look at what the senior program does and try and get little bits of information from there. I guess emulate some of that to some extent. One of our objectives is to develop players that will go on to the seniors. The best way to prepare them for what they can do in the seniors is give them as much of a taste of that as possible. And some of it is kind of, I think this is going to work. Let's give it a go. Some things do, some things don't. Again, very fortunate that in my office, I sit behind the rugby team who have got a very established program and do things very well. And I just touch base with those guys. Well, how do you do this? Oh, okay, well, how do you do this? And not afraid to ask questions, Stu, which I think is a good thing, as silly as they might be.
I think the thing about that, though, for me is it's very often the case that the learning curve for a coach. So you've spent a lot of time honing your craft, kind of developing your understanding of skill acquisition principles and all those sorts of things. Very much, the on-pitch stuff. But what a lot of people neglect to do is to hone their ability to do the off-pitch stuff. So it requires a lot of coordination. It requires a lot of planning. It requires the ability to manage individuals, who they're professionals. They're not. The dynamic between player and coach is, whether you like it or not, is often, the coach is looking to the player is looking to the coach to give them some sort of guidance. That's the relationship. Whereas you're dealing with professionals who are working, have great expertise, far more expertise and knowledge than we would have.
Yep.
And we're trying to work with them and draw the best we can out of them to support our players, coordinate it in such a way that it's not going to put them under undue pressure elsewhere. It's quite a challenging dynamic that it's very difficult to be prepared for in any other way, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think the way we go about it in our what we call MDT meetings, so multidisciplinary team meetings, is that we are just a team and we work things out together. And I guess by design, but also by having to do it this way, I've had to draw out the expertise in people, given that I've stepped into the program. And actually I stepped in really late. So a few weeks before pre-season started, I was kind of in the role. So we had to draw from everyone's experiences. And that's kind of how I coach, how I go about things anyway. So my approach wasn't necessarily the challenging bit, it was how to best utilize it. The principles in which I worked towards were very similar. And again, I think we've got a really good togetherness within that team, behind the team. And our physiologist intern, who's staying with us again next year, which is just amazing news. I keep joking, calling him the number one fan, but he still comes to the games, even though he's not technically working. He's doing a master, so he's got lots of time pressure on that side of things. But he's come to some away games and watched us, and he just is fully into it. He's got a rugby background, doesn't do a great deal of hockey, but he just fully into it now. And we'll come be down at training and try his skills out. He's now perfected a backhand. It's a little bit of back stick, so it's a bit of a foul. I haven't told him that too much because he's doing really well, so we'll let him have it for a little while. But we'll pick it up at some point. But from that, Stuart, that thing that we did with Sarah Kelleher.
Yeah.
So I thought this was brilliant. So she asked us to really quickly write 3 words down that describe the environment that you've created, or you would like to create, or you think you've created. And for me, it was really easy. So my 3 words were progressive, because I think that's kind of something that comes from me. I always like being better and pushing myself. So I hope that spills out onto what I do with the players, and actually probably with the support team too. I like us to be supportive.
Yeah.
So you need to have progression, you need to have support. And then finally, I want it to be enjoyable, because enjoyment, and I use the word enjoyment instead of fun. And I think it's might have come from one of your podcasts, actually, Stu. I've heard it recently and it resonates with me. Fun is very different for lots of different people, but enjoyment, I think, captures all. And enjoyment is very different to fun in some ways for me. So I thought to myself, okay, well, they're my 3 words, and that's good. I know those. That's brilliant. That doesn't really tell me a great deal. So I put my neck on the line a little bit, and I sent a message to our group WhatsApp that we have, and the girls got 2 WhatsApp, one with me, one without me. So I'm sure the fun stuff and the banter happens on the one without me.
Yeah.
So I put on there, okay, girls, so if someone's to ask you, how would you describe our program, our environment in 3 words? What would you say? Send me a message directly, so you don't influence other people, what you would say. And the responses I got back were just fantastic, to be quite honest. The word supportive came up 9 times. So that was, and togetherness was there another 5 or 6 times. Family was there a lot, which is really powerful for me. There's probably lots of other words that were in there at the same time. Progressive came up a couple of times. Committed, talented, intense. Someone used the word golden, which I thought was quite nice. Ambitious was in there. But also the word fun came out a lot. Exciting came out a lot. Believing, unity, entertaining. And all these words were like, whoa, that is a measure of success. And obviously we won the university competition last year, which is fantastic. But I think that for me is as big a success, if not bigger. And the experiences and the memories I have from this year will be everlasting. That gold medal will be there as well, but actually those experiences will be everlasting.
It was a massive takeaway from that session with Sarah. I was very fortunate to work with Sarah for a couple of years as part of the National Age Group Academy program within England Hockey, and great learning experience to work alongside her. Would just see her creativity, and even just the planning sessions, jumping on Skype and doing a planning session with her. It was like, how she thought of that. But that session she ran, I thought was brilliant. I mean, what I loved about it was that perfect blend between kind of sharing information, throwing in video, asking us to discuss, putting ideas out there. But one of the things I thought was, getting the WhatsApp videos, it was a big takeaway, and obviously you took it as well, big takeaway, getting the girls to just do WhatsApp videos or whatever it is, to send them in saying, this is what I think about that, and using that as an opportunity for you to almost get that kind of player feedback. I know lots of coaches out there, they'll do surveys and this, that and the other, but actually there's something much more personal about the player just doing a video and saying, this is what I thought. Now, okay, obviously you're probably going to get it slightly skewed towards the positive, so it might not be, you might use a different method to get some other sources of information and feedback. My ones were, I wrote down, I probably didn't listen to the rules because I wrote down more than 3, but I wrote down encouraging, positive, limitless, freedom, creativity, and gritty.
Oh, I love it.
They were mine. They were mine. But I got the grittiness I got from, I mean, she talks about like what was brilliant, I thought as well, was when she was talking about like when it's grit week, when the camp comes together, because she coaches the under-18s, hoping to get her on the podcast shortly, actually. When it's grit week, they don't know it's grit week. So she only announces it the night before when they're already on the way.
So we try that in pre-season. So we have about 6 weeks of pre-season. Week 4 is our grit week, and that's when the load's up, the intensity's up at certain times as well. It's a fun week. It's a good week to be the coach, not the player.
Is it gritty for you as well, though? I bet it is.
Yeah, it probably is. So we ended the week doing. There's a big open area and a big hill near Loughborough called Bradgate. So we finished the week with the Bradgate run. And we all do it together. It's a bit undulating. There's hills, and it's a challenge. And the girls are already off the feet, shall we say, by that point. And it was kind of do it all together and this kind of stuff. And I ended up joining in with them. I'm not sure if I agreed to it or they forced me, I can't remember. But either way, we went and did it with them. And that was good. It was a bit gritty, had to get through together. Some girls struggle. It was like, come on, keep going. But it is probably gritty for me too, I'd say, but in a very different way.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes I find when you're doing something, you've got to create a challenge point for a group of individuals because you know that you've got to stretch them beyond certainly what they will feel physically and emotionally comfortable. You have to. It's part of the performance. And yes, we would agree that this is important. So it's not as if we're imposing, and we're getting them to buy into the idea of going beyond their physical and mental capabilities because it's valuable for them from a performance perspective. But I don't know about you, but I find that quite emotionally difficult because whilst I like things to be challenging and gritty, I also feel for them. And so I have to fight myself. It's the hardest thing in the world. It's like being a parent and wanting to kind of save them from the pain. And I have to fight with myself to not.
It's funny you mentioned that. It's kind of pennies are dropping in my head. That's definitely what I'm feeling as well. And at the time, you're probably in it. You're like, come on, this is a good thing. But you're absolutely right. And that empathy, having been there as a player as well and knowing that it's not fun, but it is necessary and it is going to get you or potentially going to improve you in the future and put you in good stead. And there's lots of things. So going back to some of these challenges that we've faced and some probably decisions that players have made this year, which we probably step outside of what we're looking for, to make decisions based on that was really, really tough. I don't think we mentioned this, but I've got a few mentors that work with me. And on a couple of occasions, I've spoke to one of the mentors, and very fortunate, a lady called Tracy Whitaker-Smith, who is the trampolining coach, the Olympic trampolining coach, is my godmother. So I talk to her regularly and try and get her opinions on a lot of things. So I just have a conversation with her, so she can look at things very factually, very objectively, not in the bubble, as we call it. And it makes those situations a little bit easier, but not by much because they are really tough.
Is that the toughest part of the job for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. You just want everything to be great and fun and progressive and all this kind of stuff, but that at times there needs to be little learning pits and there needs to be the challenges and some tough times in order to get to where the ultimate goal is. And we had one that led into box final, and that was incredibly tough, but ultimately the right decision, I hope.
So, we're probably not just in that context. You're probably not just, you're talking about the tough conversations, the difficult conversations. But, we're not just talking about deselection or what have you, but just to focus on, say, deselection, because obviously yours is a very competitive program with very able individuals who probably all think that they deserve a place. How do you manage the deselection conversation?
That comes into the biggest challenges of the role, I believe. Well, that's for sure, to be honest. Very different environment in that we have 2 selections, 2 games per week. So it is relentless. Sometimes 3 games a week, Stu. So it is constant. Going back to this decision-rich environment, at the beginning of the season, we sat down in a room together, got them into small groups or maybe into pairs. And I just wanted to talk about selection. What does it look like? How does it happen? What gets you selected? What doesn't get you selected? And actually get them to really think about what they want, because it ultimately is going to affect them the most. And then had up on the whiteboard, selection with a circle around the middle, and then we just went off from there and we wrote all these different things that are going to mean that you are selected or going to mean that you're probably not selected, with a little thing at the bottom around, well, if it's not captured in any of the little circles, what happens then? We have a leadership group, and they said, right, it needs to go to the leadership group. So that was really enlightening. With a few ways that we do it. So on a Monday, we do selection for Wednesday, and we always take 16 players. Again, this Disney world that I live in, we're always able to take 16 the maximum.
What, you mean you're not scrabbling around on a Friday night, trying to see who's available and who can get out of their childcare situation in order to be able to play? You don't have that scenario.
No, I've been there and done that, and as fun as that was, I do like the fact that we can always take 16. So we do selection on Monday for Wednesday, and then we do what we call the provisional squad on Monday, ready for the weekend. So roughly we have 16, 17, 18, maybe 19, 20 players on that provisional squad who may play on the Saturday. So you can kind of balance and kind of pre-plan. So it might be that we're off to Durham on Saturday and the twos are at home at 11 o'clock, and that will obviously influence how you then plan your life around it. So as much as I'd love them to be 100% hockey, I believe they do have a life outside of it, I'm told. And they'll probably tell you that I think that way as well if you ask them. So we do that. Back to your point earlier, Stu. So we have about 26, 27 within what we call the performance squad, and we all train together. For all intents and purposes, we are the squad, and we are the biggest squad. And when we did the 3-word descriptors, they all put the words in, and they all put togetherness and family, and that is one of the overarching fundamentals of what we do. We are a family, and when girls come in and spend a day with us, they always come back and say that, how friendly all are when they come to the training sessions, and how much of a family feel there is. But that also makes it really difficult, because I think all of those 26, 27 girls are all good enough, if not better than what they need to be to play at the levels that we play at. But I can only select 16 at any one time. Try to reduce all the as much uncertainty as possible. And we then have what I've called role descriptors, which isn't particularly sexy, Stu, but it was a word I came up with when I was writing them. And that just lists kind of 3 or 4 bullet points of a real kind of, I don't want to use the word principle, but kind of overarching thing that we want a certain person to do. So to give you an example, a couple of ones from our forwards is to be fit and fast, get ahead, carry the ball really aggressively forwards, and get positive outcomes at the end. So that's not, you must always attack down the right and go on your forehand and enter the baseline. That is, you need to go forward fast. Whatever way that works for you in the situation, that's what we need you to do. We're also looking for our forwards to be threatening in the D. So again, that could be hitting, diving deflections, backhands, backspace, and all these hockey skills that they might have amassed. Or it might be they've got one skill, but they're so bloody good at it, that makes them a threat in the D. And then finally, we've got some defensive elements to our forwards. And when it comes to selection, those are the role descriptors that I use. So I will pick players who are just doing those better at that point. Or, especially with the forwards, because we had quite a lot of forwards last year, I will pick players who, within the squad of 5 that we take, enough of them hit our best at those areas. So we have a couple of players who are exceptionally threatening in the D. We've got a couple of players who are very good carrying the ball forward. And we've got a couple of players who are exceptionally good defensively. So I might pick an amalgamation of those 5. So we satisfy all those role descriptors, which again is a challenge, because I might come in, I might be really good at all of them, but I might not have a super strength in one. And therefore I might just miss out every now and again because someone gets picked me on that one and someone gets picked me on that one. And it's a big challenge, but we're really open, we're really clear that this is the way we're going to do it. So when I have conversations around not being selected, those are what we talk about in the situations. But then we also have some times where certain teams we play against, and again, Disneyland, we're pretty good at opposition analysis. We have video from the previous few years. We know what we're likely to experience. So do they play a zonal press? Are they man-to-man? Do they high press, deep, goalkeepers, short corners? We have a rough idea of what we need to do to win. There might be some players who have certain skills that will work better against the team compared to others that work better against another team. Which again, is a real big challenge, because one player might think, well, I'm in a better place than the other player, but you are. But actually for this game, this skill is going to be really important. So we don't have anyone with a huge aerial, but it might be that a team really high presses us, and an aerial skill where they can just flick it over the top of everyone becomes a really valuable skill for that game. If a team sits back, well, actually that skill is kind of redundant or isn't quite as important. So I might pick someone who can play more intricate passes or do some different kind of skills. And again, very fortunate, I've got a really big player base to pick from and choose from. And next year I've got some exceptionally talented players coming to the program again. And probably more excitingly, I've got some characters that I can't wait to get into the environment, because I think they're just going to enhance what we do and are really going to buy in from knowing them and experiences around the talent pathway and that kind of stuff. I just know they're just going to fit so well with what we're trying to do.
Brilliant.
It's going to make it different. We're going to make it very difficult. At the same time, good problem.
Yeah, I suppose that's the goal, isn't it? I mean, having worked in talent development a long time, one of the things I always said that the goal was to try and make the people above me who've got to make tough selection decisions make their job as hard as possible. Yep. I almost take pleasure in the fact that there's this oversupply of quality.
Yep.
you never. It's rare. Well, I say rare. I mean, that's a fairly unique situation to be in, I think, as a coach, when you've got this, supply of talented individuals. And most of us who've worked, say, in clubland, for example, even working at like National League level, coaching at clubland, I've got coaching guys who've got fairly into, some of them are doctors, some of them are lawyers, and some of them are people working in business, traveling all parts of the world, and they come along and they're committing to train as many for 3 hours a week for whatever it might be, and they're committing to get a game. But even within that context, you pretty much know the core kind of 11, 12, 13 players that are going to be part of your squad, and everyone kind of knows that. So
to give a bit of context then, so we play in 2 competitions, a Wednesday university league and a Saturday club league. Within the Wednesday league, we used 30 players over a 14 game season. We then used 25 players in the Saturday league over what was probably a 18 game season. And that's through form, the teams we're playing against, injuries, unavailability, international commitments. I've got a little color coded spreadsheet which my line manager loves because she thinks I'm really organised, and all this kind of stuff goes everywhere. And I've got a colour which is just miscellaneous because other things that just affect people's availability. But I met the basketball coach at Loughborough yesterday for a coffee. He made a really good comment to me, and I think this might apply to us next year. So often that the coach makes selection decisions, which ultimately that's kind of who puts the signs on the dotted line. But actually next year, it might well be the players that make the selection decisions. The players that are fully committed to the program, they do everything they need to do and will outcompete other people, might just make themselves selected. And even though I'm looking ahead thinking this is going to be a real big challenge, it may become really obvious. And the players that do what they need to do and more will then just outcompete, and the players end up doing the selection for me. And that's a real mindset shift, isn't it? It's interesting.
I used to say that to in an effort to kind of develop the group and whatever. I used to say your job is to make yourself undeselectable.
Yep.
And if you're not part of that group, so you're not selected, then your job is to make yourself more selectable than the person who's been selected. And so that person in that group there knows that you're breathing down their neck, or these people who you could potentially take the place of, it's your job to be. Because I've always been a big believer when it's a deselection conversation is to say, this is close. I've had to make a judgment call. You've got strengths, they've got strengths. This is not about you as an individual, or this is not a judgment call on on anything about you as a character necessarily. This is about a range of abilities and qualities that mean for this particular moment, this individual has the edge. However, that can change. It's not fixed, and it's not always going to be that way. And it's very much down to you what you now decide to do. Decision, Rich. You now decide to do in order to bring about a change of circumstance. Again,
I'm just going to jump in there, Stu, and I think these role descriptors that we put forward are really great for the hockey because it's really clear, okay, I need to work on these. And actually 2 things. Our culture is starting to breed that now. So I had a one-to-one with a fantastic character within our group. Right at the end of the season, I was assuming it'd be, okay, what do I need to do to get selected in the last couple of games? But actually one of the first questions is, over our summer trainings, we do 6 weeks of training at the end of the season because we have the opportunity to do so. What do I need to do to get better? And I was like, wow, if this is what we're creating, then I'm really, really happy. But on the flip of that, when we look to do these role descriptors next year, what I haven't included and what I definitely need to include is the other things away from stuff on the pitch. So what do they bring to the team? What do they do when they're on the bench? What do they do in the build-up? How well are they preparing for games? And actually, that might become a bigger selection factor than the hockey itself. And this really, well, again, this coffee that I had with Mark yesterday, he said his 12th player, so basketball team, 12th player rarely plays, his 12th player was the player of the season because he led everything in training. He pushed everyone to the best they could be. Match day, he was the one bringing the energy. He would high-five people coming off the bench and thank them for the effort they put on the pitch. He would give prompts. He would give in the coaching points or the principles they're trying to work towards. And he was just this character who was just undroppable, but didn't play a great deal of basketball. And I'm like, wow, I've really overlooked this. This is something that I think is absolutely vital, and going into next year could be incredibly vital. And we had a game, in fact, our first win of the season, I think it might have been, against a very, very good university who the weekend before we'd lost to heavily. And we got a chance to play them again on the Wednesday, and the girls were so fired up. We want this. We're at home, played away on the Saturday, home on the Wednesday. And the biggest thing that stood out for me for that game is that every single person was noisy on the pitch and off the pitch. So all 5 players on the bench were engaged, were giving information, were positive, were diligent, all these great things. And we came on, we won 5-0, and it was just domination. We kept the ball. I've got it on my performance analysis, my video. There's a 5-minute clip where we turned over the ball 3 times, but yet we only didn't have the ball for 18 seconds. We won the ball back, kept it, won the ball back, kept it, won the ball back, kept it, scored. And it is just, still trying to replicate it and go for it again, but it happened. So that's a good thing.
I think that's a really useful point actually you've made there, which is, and again, I think something often overlooked, which is, we very often make selection decisions based on the sort of technical or tactical performance capabilities, and we can be clear about those. But it's, again, if we're trying to be robust about culture and also the behaviours that make up our day-to-day behaviours that make up or kind of bring to life what our culture is. It's not just a nebulous concept. It's actually, this is how we behave to bring about our culture, day to day in sessions, and this is where things like, Mark Bennett's rule of 3 or
that might come up.
Or whatever it is, if you're living and breathing those things, and people who are bought into that kind of cultural concept around being a very strong and vocal communicator and being supportive with the group and all those sorts of things. I'm not saying that's the only selection criteria you would use, because you still, like you say, you still want a level of ability, but given that a lot of your players are going to be at relatively equal levels of ability, give or take a few things, it could come down to that, couldn't it?
I think it absolutely will. And I really look forward to get started, again, because of the talent of the hockey players that are coming in, but just the people. I'm really excited to work with the people that are coming in. And so we're going to do some stuff, one of our team culture sessions, around what it takes to win. Okay, but we're in a very fortunate position that I can actually reword that and put it down as what it took to win. And the girls that were here last year, we can talk about, actually, okay, we did this. We had these challenges at the beginning of the year, but we did this to overcome it. And that will then morph into, okay, so for this year, what will it take to win? And I think that is going to be super powerful. And when you go down to training, we'll be able to live and breathe those. And we'll definitely be using some of Mark Bennett's principles. And we'll keep each other, well, hopefully they'll keep themselves accountable for what we think is going to make us win. We then hopefully keep each other accountable for that. And then if they can't do that, then I might need to step in at that point and say, right, well, we said we're going to do this. This is what we said is going to mean we're going to be successful, and we're not doing it. Why is that happening? What do we need to do differently? How are we going to make this be what it needs to be? And I'm really excited to get that going.
Yeah, I've just thought of something. Again, this is just an idea. By all means, you can do with it what you want. Most of my ideas are pretty wacky. I work on the basis of quantity, not quality. I throw a lot of quantity at you, and one of them might stick and might work. But you might want to flip it the other way. I've done something in the past which I found quite powerful called a pre-mortem.
Yeah. So
this is about basically articulating all of the things that could go wrong that would make our season or our culture just fall to pieces. Yeah. Because often people can evoke the negative more easily than they can evoke the positive.
Absolutely.
Or it certainly impacts them emotionally stronger. So, what did we do to die? Or what did we do to destroy it? Or, what did we do to lose? Whatever it might be. But, almost like sort of playing forward around, these are all the things that if we did these things, it would destroy us.
Yeah.
So that you can constantly be on the lookout for them.
Yeah.
Might be an interesting way of framing it.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant. And again, back to our conversation last year, when you threw some of the challenges I might want to throw forward, as much as I was keen to get into them, I was very aware that I'm this new coach on the block and I'm going to do this, and who's in India kind of doing all these crazy things. Whereas this year, I've had a year, so watch out. It's probably my word to shout out there. But no, yeah, I think that'd be a really great one. And you're absolutely right. It's easy to really pick apart. Okay, well, that actually might happen, and we actually had a little bit of that last year, but we managed to overcome it. But if that happens again, but worse, what happens? Or this injury happens, or okay, we only got one drag flicker. What happens if they get injured, or X, Y, and Z? And actually, we can really pick apart the things that might go wrong and put interventions in place. Or if they do happen, we're already kind of mentally prepared for them. Perhaps we've already spoke about them.
Yeah,
I was with the under 18s actually at the weekend. Sarah wasn't available on the Saturday, so I stepped in for her and did some work with Andy Bradshaw, who I'm sure you're very aware of, around what are the perceived demands of the task, and what is your perceived ability of the task, and the gap in between those two is the stress level.
Yeah.
So if the task is really simple and there's no, in inverted commas, pressure, because pressure is a word we band around quite a lot, your ability is probably pretty fixed, and that stress is probably relatively manageable and small in the middle. But if there's a crowd, if you're losing, if things aren't going your way and momentum's not doing momentum's going the other way, maybe the perceived demands of that task, which a minute ago was relatively static and easier, might be a bit harder.
Yeah.
So that line then goes a bit higher, so that stress level gets bigger in the middle, which actually might make your perceived ability decrease.
Yeah.
Again, that stress level in the middle gets even bigger.
Yeah.
So actually, how do we handle that stress? What coping mechanisms do we have? Is it the fact that we just need to be aware of it and know that the stress is going to be there and overcome it? Some of the things that the girls we were working with were suggesting was going back to basics. Okay, don't try anything too fancy. Just get the first touch right, 2-3 touches, 30 seconds of basic play to then go back into this freedom and creativity, which might then decrease the perceived demands, increase the ability to perception of your ability, and that stress level then decreases, and you can have more freedom in the areas that you're potentially going to make are not going to be there so frequently.
It's interesting because just thinking about that, a huge generalization, but one of the things that I've discovered in my career around coaching men and women is I often find that women's perceived ability is far lower than it actually is in general.
Yeah.
And with boys, it's usually the opposite. They think they're way better than they are.
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting topic of discussion, maybe not one for now, but I think there is differences between boys and girls, males and females, hugely generalized, and there's lots of differences between it. And the message is always coach the individual, not what you think that individual is. Yeah. But there are differences. And you speak to Danny Kerry, who delivered a talk to us recently. It's a taboo. It's a taboo that we talk about the differences between male and female. Yeah. But I think the taboo is holding us back slightly. Yeah. If we can explore a little bit about, okay, when you're coaching females, these things are probably have slight more importance. Yeah. Actually, when you coach boys, these things have a bit more importance. And actually that might just enhance how we coach those people and might then make everything better. Yeah. And there is always generalization, there's always stereotypes, and I'm definitely not informed in this subject, but I do feel that we just have to talk about it more. The more we talk about it, the more we discover, and the better we will be as an industry.
Often people, again, don't want to go into the detail, but often when people talk about this and they challenge it, it's often they talk about the reasons why that is. And I totally buy into that. I think there are societal challenges that we need to overcome to actually address this thing, but that doesn't make them any less real.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But that is definitely a sociological discussion for a different day and possibly even a different podcast. Brett, talking about perceived demands and perceived ability, I've actually now got to sort of jump onto a piece of work that is definitely stretching me from its perceived demands and my perceived ability to do it. But that is an hour and a half that has literally gone by like the blink of an eye. And I could talk to you for another hour and a half, and I still don't think we'd scratch the surface. But it's been a long time having this conversation, and I'm really glad that we were able to do it. I've thoroughly, every time I chat to you, I thoroughly enjoy the conversations. I always learn loads of things. I know that people out there may want to get in touch with you because you've said something that they want to find out more about, or they want to understand a bit about your program, or they might want to, I know you're very open and very happy to share ideas with people, and you've definitely always been keen to, you learn from people, but you always give back in spades. How do they get in touch?
So a few methods really. So Twitter's always a great one, isn't it? So my Twitter handle is at hockey_Brett, which is very original. Don't laugh, Stu. We've got webcam here. I know people can't see that on the podcast. But yeah, that is my Twitter handle. And my email is b.holland@elborough, which is lboro.ac.uk. And yeah, absolutely really open to conversations, grabbing coffee, people come down and watch. So you and I both do tutoring with England Hockey, and quite often people ask, hey, can I just come and watch you? And the answer is always yes. And I'd always massively encourage it. So I know from my CPD background, watching other coaches is just a fantastic way of learning. Whether it's, I really like that and I'm going to try and embed a bit of that into my practice, or actually, I wouldn't do it like that. And it probably confirms what you think is good practice at the same time. And you often find people that you go and watch will have a conversation with you afterwards. And if you come to Loughborough, we'll certainly do the same. I'm sure my partner at home wouldn't enjoy it too much because it means I'm later at home. But if people are going to make that effort, then I'm more than willing to make the effort reciprocally.
That's brilliant. I can't laugh at you for being Hockey Brett. I've got an email address that's reverse sticks to you, so I'm just as bad. So. Brett, once again, enormous thanks for sharing your knowledge, sharing what it's like to work in coaching Disneyland, and I'm hoping that as you move forward into the next season and as we're learning more, that you'll be prepared to come back on and let's have a conversation about other things that are happening in your world.
Yeah, sounds great.
Good stuff. Cheers.
Thank you, Stu. See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.
Kaboom. What a great conversation that was with the Walt Disney of coaching. No, I'm being unfair, but what a great job Brett's got, hey? Got to be one of the best ones out there. But really good insight into his commitment and the organisation's commitment to providing that kind of full wraparound support to to a group of potential high performance athletes. The principles he talks about of valuing the individual, that decision-rich environment, unrivaled holistic support, and the strive for excellence really come through. And I think we might dig into his methodology on the decision-rich environment on the next go, but really valuable. I'll definitely be taking some of that away, particularly using WhatsApps to get players to talk about how much they like the environment. So that's one of the big takeaways from me there. Wanted to say a big shout out to Mark Dick, who's come on board as a Patreon supporter. Mark, your support is greatly appreciated. Fist bumps from me. We're on a bit of a learning journey here, so I hope you're going to enjoy being with us while we continue to learn together. Anybody else wants to come on board? There are a few spots available in the Conclave. We recently did a bit of an interesting experiment with the Conclave, which you'll hear about in a week or so's time. In the meantime, have a great week of coaching, and remember, ditch those drills,